The DSi, this was Nintendo's Pro console during the DS generation. Also, if you're curious for any reason, the DSi is kind of not region locked, so if you're interested in getting a, like Japanese only color like this, especially like this glossy red, because there was a glossy red and a matte red, so do not get swindled. If you're looking for the nice glossy red like this, make sure you look up glossy, make sure it is glossy. If you want the matte, go for the matte, either way. People complain about fingerprint magnets, when it comes to like glossy devices, and while there is a case to be made about that, for this red one specifically, it isn't glossy enough to where it's actually a fingerprint magnet, so, if you want this color, I could recommend going for it, because there's barely, like, any noticeable scratches or fingerprints on this thing, and it literally just, it's just a beautiful device. Anyway, I forgot if I actually mentioned it or not. I was about to mention it before I probably cut myself off, but the DSi is and kind of isn't region locked, so you can play most DS games on it, but there will be, for like some of the DSi exclusive games, you have to look at like the, what's it called, like the serial number on it. If it says NTR on the game, you can run it. If it says TWL, you're gonna need the Japanese version. However, if you mod the system, which I would recommend doing, especially, if you do end up picking up a Japanese system specifically, I would recommend modding it so then you can run everything in English, because otherwise you cannot change the language on it without modding it. So when I first got the system, I had to hold up a camera with Google Translate to navigate the system a bit, but then I got it modded and, change the language so then I could actually read it a bit more, because while I can read some Japanese, I'm kind of limited to only hiragana, so I can only read bits and pieces here, and then when it comes to the katakana and kanji in it, I was kind of getting lost because I only know a little bit of kanji. But otherwise, the DSi was Nintendo's, pro console for the DS generation. Again, we had the DS and the DS Lite before this, but the DSi was almost like an entirely new system, akin to something like the Game Boy Color, where it's like, okay, for a moment you could almost argue that maybe it was almost its own thing because they had exclusive games for it, but Nintendo seems to handle their Pro consoles differently than the other manufacturers, because again, if a game goes to the One X or the PS4 Pro, it's gonna go to the base consoles. But for Nintendo's Pro consoles, as we have already talked about, the SP being the only exception, since that wasn't really a Pro console in the same way, it was just more or less hardware revisions. With the Game Boy Color, there was a lot of exclusive games to it, to the point where it felt like a successor to the Game Boy. And then the DSi, you had DSiWare, you had like 3 physical DSi exclusive games, with System Flaw, Photo Showdown, and the Hair Salon game. And then you had all the DSiWare, which there is a case to be made that a lot of the DSiWare games were technically just stripped down versions of pre-existing DS games, but there was still a lot of original games there, like Shantae is one of the go-to standouts there, obviously, of DSiWare. So in one aspect, yeah, it's following the philosophy of previous and future Nintendo Pro consoles or handheld consoles that we're going to be talking about, where there is some exclusive games on it, but for the most part, it's basically within the same family. It's considered to be within the same family and is a part of the same generation. It's just a slight upgrade in terms of software, hardware, etc. So when it came to the original DS Lite, obviously there wasn't much of a OS on the system, right? Yeah, there was obviously. Every piece of software, or every piece of hardware needs software like an OS to work and get you from point A to point B. Like when you turn on the system and it says Nintendo DS and you have all your options there, that is the operating system. That is what lets you operate the system per se. You know what I mean? So there is an OS. It's rather light on the DS and the DS Lite. Get it? Anyway. But in the DSi, we actually got a bit of actual software where it felt very Wii-like, if you want to put it that way, where you had a lot of these channel-looking boxes. Again, obviously it wasn't going for the same Wii channel language, but it was going for a very similar boxy language where you navigate between the different boxes. It takes you from your home screen to your camera to your recordings to your microphone to your game, and it's a very nice in and out type of thing, very much akin to the Wii. You point the remote, you click on one channel, you go to the next Wii channel, you edit your Mii's, you go to your weather, your settings, whatever. Same thing on the DS. You just kind of go between these things, and it's very fast, it's very fluent. And furthermore, this was one of their first official Pro consoles in the way that there was actual improvements to the specs. In terms of what games actually took advantage of that, it wasn't very many. There is a list of like DSi enhanced games out there where they'll utilize certain features of the system, because that is also worth mentioning, where we did have new features introduced here in the system, like we have a camera on the back as well as on the front, so you could use that, and then, certain other features like the voice recordings and stuff like that. Again, we kind of already had voice recordings on the DS Lite, but it was more or less just voice recognition rather than full-on recordings like you could here, and again, you had like the cameras and all that. So, there was a lot of enhancements made not only to the hardware inside of the system, but also it was just like an entirely new revision without being an entirely new device. And again, we had some games that were enhanced for the DSi, whether that be certain features where you could take pictures of yourself and put yourself inside of the game, or other features just like slightly boosted performance. In terms of everything else, the screens were only slightly bigger, so the DS and the DS Lite had 3-inch screens on the top and bottom, whereas the DSi has 3.25-inch screens on the top and bottom. The resolution was the exact same, so the games are going to look basically identical, just on a slightly bigger scale or on a slightly bigger screen than on the original DS. But thankfully, it's not too big to the point of where it looks like blown out or blurry. I mean, even on the DSi XL, even though that screen is substantially larger, almost 2 inches larger, the screens don't look, like blown out or blurry, like even with the same resolution, because the XL has the same resolution as even the original DS and DS Lite. The games still look absolutely beautiful, and I feel like that also just kind of feeds into the fact that a lot of the games during the DS, and that also goes back to what I was saying about the GBA, where a lot of the games on the DS just look absolutely beautiful. Even the games that were going for more of like a 3D aesthetic, like it sort of has like that low poly PS1, N64 look, so those look beautiful. But then you also have a lot of beautiful 2D games with more of that like pixel art style. Like the first one that comes to my mind is like the Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith tie-in game, which had more of a pixel art style. Or Kirby Squeak Squad is another one that looks great with that more cartoonish pixely art style. So even on an XL, it still looks really good. And just I don't know, there's just, again, something about those games with that art style where it's like, man, it's like the modern day Mona Lisa looking at those beauties, you know what I mean? The DSi is also where they finally introduce a more universal charger port that they would use going forward. So the charger for the DSi works on the 3DS and the 2DS and all those other systems, so that is very nice, because again, before this, we had the SP charger, which worked with the DS, but that didn't work with the DS Lite. The DS Lite has its own charger that only works with it. And then the DSi, XL, 3DS, and the 2DS, and all those systems finally, again, share like the same charger there. And otherwise, outside of that, I feel like that mostly covers the DSi. Again, we got way more colors with this thing. There was a lot of special variations. I want to get my hands on that light blue one we were talking about, as well as the lime green looking one. I don't know. I've never really owned any green systems, now that I'm thinking of it, but I don't know. That one just kind of appealed to me. I saw it on eBay. I was like, man, that's a really nice color, and I remember seeing it a couple of years ago, so I'm thinking about that. Might pick that one up at some point, but otherwise I feel like that covers most of our bases with the DSi there, right? We cover the exclusive games and some of the performance boosts and such, so really when it comes to the original DS, you can't go wrong with any model. If you want to get like the most games, technically speaking, you probably want to go with the DSi. Maybe, if you want to go bang for buck, get a Japanese DSi, mod it to display in English, and then, the possibilities are limitless there between playing original DS games. Obviously, it also supports original DS cartridges, as well as playing DSiWare and such. But it is also worth mentioning that while this is a Pro-type system, the one disadvantage is that the original DS and DS Lite could play Game Boy Advance cartridges natively, whereas the DSi doesn't have a Game Boy Advance cartridge slot. Kind of sucks, I know, which also makes it so that certain games like Guitar Hero, you simply can't even play on the DSi because you need the GBA, slot there to play it. But again, the slot isn't there, so for certain games that need attachments like that, which was like less than 10, you won't be able to play those on a DSi. But very niche scenario. So if you want to cover all your bases, maybe just pick up a DSi, and go ahead and pick up a 3DS while you're at it.